Hello and welcome to the post-examination information session for postgraduate students. My name is Gemma Douglas and I'm a Senior Advisor at the Student Advice Service. To give you a bit more detail about the service, we are a service that specialises in providing free, confidential and independent support to all students at Cambridge University. Before we get going, I just want to clarify who the information in this session is relevant to. So it is relevant to students studying for the following qualifications: MPhil by Advanced Study and Dissertation, MRes, MLitt, MST, Graduate B.D, M.D, VetM.D, PhD, Bus.D, EngD, MSc, MLitt, Certificate of Postgraduate Study, Graduate Diploma in Economics, Legal Studies and International Law. In this session, I'm aiming to cover the following information. So, what do we mean when we talk about mitigating circumstances and/or grave cause? What to do if you experience mitigating circumstances and/or grave cause? What do we mean when we talk about the conduct of the exam? And what to do if you experience issues with the conduct of the exam? And what if you've experienced neither but feel that your work deserved a higher mark? So I'm going to explain the different terms here slightly. So, when we talk about mitigating circumstances and/or grave cause, this could include things such as mental or physical health issues that affected your preparation, performance or attendance of the exam. For grave cause, it might be that you were affected by something that was unanticipated or completely beyond your control, such as the death of a parent or a serious family emergency. So during COVID-19, it could also include disruptions you experience, such as technical difficulties and/or caring responsibilities. When we talk about the conduct of the examination, this could include any issues that you experience with the examination itself and how it was conducted. For an example, a mistake on an examination paper, or the date of your viva was changed at the last minute. Okay. So we're going to start with discussing what can be done if you experience mitigating circumstances and/or grave cause, and if this affected your preparation, performance or attendance of your exam. In the first instance, I would discuss with students what has happened and if they received any help or let anyone know about what was happening. This could be done by speaking to a medical professional such as the nurse or a GP, or it could be done by letting your college tutor know what the situation is. The reason that I ask this is because students can present their case and make the university aware of what happened by laying out exactly what happened and providing evidence to support this. However, during COVID-19, the university has said that it is also possible for students to self-certify mitigating circumstances and/or grave cause. Something else to bear in mind is that as the university has had to adapt to the ongoing situation, they've made clear the following expectation for postgraduate taught students. For those that were not able to take all or part of their assessments in the Easter term, they are expecting them to be able to take them in the second assessment period. So if you're a student that's not able to take your assessment in either period, you could look to make an application for an examination allowance. And I'm going to talk a bit more about that in a minute. So in terms of procedures, if you experience mitigating circumstances, so when a student presents their case to the university that relates to exams and mitigating circumstances, for most postgraduate students, this would be called applying for an examination allowance. However, for some postgraduate students, they would present their case through something called the examination review procedure. And these students include those that are studying towards a graduate BD, an MD, a VetM.D, a PhD, a Bus.D, EngD, MSc, MLitt, and MPhil degree by dissertation or a certificate of postgraduate study. So applications for an examination allowance have to be submitted by your college tutor to the Secretary of the Board of Graduate Studies. And if you wish, you can provide a personal statement to accompany that application. Applications via the examination review procedure can be submitted by the student themselves. Something that's important to remember is that an examination allowance does not affect the marks received. The purpose of the allowance is to provide students the opportunity to obtain the qualification they've been registered for, if the Board of Graduate Studies accepts that their performance in the examination was affected by mitigating circumstances. If an examination allowance application is successful, the possible outcomes from that could include to approve the candidate for the qualification without further examination. This is only possible if the relevant degree committee has recommended that the candidate has performed with credit in a substantial part of the examination, or to allow candidates to be examined or re-examined under such conditions and at a time determined by the board after consultation with the appropriate degree committee. If an examination review application is successful, the possible outcomes from this can include to require the examiners to examine or re-examine the candidate, to require new examiners to re-examine the candidate, to permit the candidate to submit a revised dissertation or other assessment, to require one or more additional examiners to make an independent report or reports on the work submitted by the candidate, to require the examining body to set the candidate new examination papers or other assessments. Just to be clear that there are deadlines for these procedures. So for the examination allowance, applications must be submitted no later than 3 months after the date on which the examination outcome was communicated to you by the degree committee or the Board of Graduate Studies. And for the examination review procedure, applications must be submitted within 28 days of having received your results. So if your examination allowance application is unsuccessful or you're unsatisfied with the outcome and reason behind the decision, students can request a review of the decisions of university bodies under the following grounds. So if a student felt that there was a procedural irregularity that occurred during the decision-making process, which were material or potentially material to the decision reached, and/or the decision is unreasonable in that no reasonable person could have reached the same decision on the available evidence, and/or the availability of new evidence which materially impacts on the outcome and which, for valid reason, could not have been submitted at an earlier stage. If you're unsatisfied with the outcome of the review, you can make a representation to the Office of the Independent Adjudicator, also known as the OIA, within 1 year of receiving the outcome of the review and your completion of procedures letter. So the OIA is an independent body that will consider whether the university followed its procedures in considering your case and whether the procedures are fair. If you submitted an application through the examination review procedure for mitigating circumstances, I'll talk about that review procedure a bit later on. So I've spoken to you about what happens when a student feels they experience mitigating circumstances in their preparation, performance, and/or attendance of their exam. I'm now going to talk about what options there are for students experience issues with the conduct of the exam. So as mentioned earlier, by issues with the conduct of the exam, we mean that there was an issue or concern with the examination process itself. So some issues can be resolved informally, such as an irregularity with the exam process. An example of this could be that there is a mistake on the paper that affected your performance. And students can raise this informally within 5 days of the exam by submitting a form entitled the representation to the examiner. This allows the issue to be reported to the chair of examiners and considered by the examiners at their final meeting. So for other issues, but also including the one I mentioned, these issues, they can be presented after 5 days from the examination, but within 28 days of the examination result becoming available. These would be raised via the examination review procedure. So there are specific grounds under which a request for an examination review regarding the conduct of the exam can be raised. So if you've taken an examination and believe that one of the following has occurred, you can submit an application to be considered for an examination review. So a procedural irregularity in the examination process that has adversely impacted on the candidate's examination result, demonstrable bias or the perception of bias within the examination process, the withdrawal of academic provision which has had a demonstrable impact on the examination itself, of which the examining board were not aware. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about what each of those grounds entails. So what is a procedural irregularity? So in usual circumstances, a procedural irregularity could include things like there was an issue with large amounts of external noise, there was a disturbance in the exam room, or a mistake on the paper that affected your performance. Another example that could be another example that could include would be that the viva was not conducted as described, or approved reasonable adjustments were not adhered to. However, with COVID-19, I do understand that some of these examples wouldn't apply, but I'm hoping that by giving them to you, it gives you an idea of what would fall within a procedural irregularity. So what is demonstrable bias, or the perception of bias within the examination process? So an example could be that you may have reason to believe that your paper wasn't marked anonymously, and or that the examiner assessing your work may have been biased toward you. A way that you could evidence this is through, for example, the examiner's written comments that could be interpreted as bias. So what do we mean by the withdrawal of academic provision? An example could be that during the periods of industrial action, if a student felt that they were examined on material that was not covered due to the action, they could raise that under that ground. And you could evidence this by specifying the dates of the industrial action and the academic provision that was not received as a result. So if your application for an examination review is successful, the possible outcomes from this could include to uphold the candidate's request where at least one of the grounds has been met, and either referring back to the examining body for reconsideration in accordance with the examining body's written rules and guidance, or require the examining body to re-examine the candidate in conditions considered appropriate by the examination review officer, including to require the examiners to examine or re-examine the candidate, to require new examiners to re-examine the candidate, to permit the candidate to submit a revised dissertation or other assessment, to require one or more additional examiners to make an independent report or reports on the work submitted by the candidate, to require the examining body to set the candidate new examination papers or other assessments. So what about if you feel that your work deserved a higher mark, but you don't feel your circumstance falls within the grounds for a review? In most cases, what this means is that the reasons would come under academic judgment, and neither the examination review procedure nor any other formal procedure can be used to challenge academic judgment. So what happens if your application for an examination review is unsuccessful, or you're unsatisfied with the outcome and reasons behind the decision? So students can request a review of that decision, and they can make the requests on the following grounds. So there was a procedural irregularity that occurred during the reconsideration, which were material to the potentially material to the decision being reached. The decision is unreasonable in that no reasonable person or body could have reached the same decision on the available evidence. The availability of new evidence which materially impacts the decision and which, for valid reasons, could not have been submitted at an earlier stage. Something to bear in mind with the review processes is that there is a strict 14-day deadline from the formal decision being issued within which to submit a request for a review. Like I mentioned earlier, if you're unsatisfied with the outcome of the review, you can make a representation to the OIA, so the Office of the Independent Adjudicator, within 1 year of receiving the outcome of the review decision and your completion of procedures letter. I hope this information has been helpful. If you would like more support, you should definitely consider speaking to your college tutor about any of the matters discussed, whether it's relating to mitigating circumstances that affect your examination or issues with the conduct of the examination. You may also wish to access the university guidance yourself. Links to the procedures discussed within this session can be found in the video description. So these procedures include the examination review procedure, the examination allowance procedure for certain postgraduate students, and review of decisions of university bodies procedure. You may also wish to get advice from us at the Student Advice Service. To arrange an appointment or receive support by email, you can access the service by emailing us on advice@studentadvice.cam.ac.uk or by phoning us on 01223 746 999. As a service, we're open Monday through Friday, 9 AM to 5 PM, and we're able to offer appointments via phone, Zoom, Skype, and Microsoft Teams. Many thanks for listening, and I hope that you have a good day.